So I feel like, made a couple rookie mistakes.
Okay, stop. We need to back up to a few weeks ago when this all started.
Someone was an IPA, you probably never would be able to tell the difference. I might brew my IPAs from this point forward using 3470, and instead of making an IPA, use a lager yeast and make an IPL. I think that would be a pretty cool experiment.
You see, that India Pale Lager I made was really good, so I decided to try another split batch. But this time, brew day did not go as smoothly. That IPL really got me thinking about trying a lager yeast in more styles. So for this batch, I decided to take a pale ale recipe I had been toying with and make it a little bit larger so I could do a split batch. The plan was to end up with 8 gallons of wort so I could split it into 2 kegs and ferment 4 gallons of each, one with an ale yeast and one with a lager yeast. After adding my water and adjusting with brewing salts, I mashed in a grain bill that used a combination of Pilsner and Pale Malts for my base malts, CaraVienne and light Munich for a little flavor and color, and white wheat malt to help with body and head retention. I mashed for 45 minutes at 152 degrees F, and then raised the temp to 168 degrees for a 10-minute mash out. So far so good, right? Well, not so much. You see, when I put this recipe together in Brewfather, it calculated a total mash water volume of 11.93 gallons. I decided on brew day, earlier that morning, for whatever reason, that I didn't want to open another 5-gallon jug of water. So, I only started with 10 gallons.
Rookie mistake.
Now, there are some things I could have done at this point to fix this, like just sparge with that extra water. But after pulling the bag and giving it a squeeze, I was only 0.4 of a gallon under my pre-boil volume, which is not really a big deal at this point. So I moved forward and proceeded to bring the wort to a boil. I added a first wort hop edition of Magnum, a 20-minute edition of Cascade, and a flame out edition of Cascade and Centennial. I started to chill my wort as usual, and then got ready to transfer to my fermenters. For this split batch, I wanted to try fermenting in kegs so I could fit both into my chest freezer during fermentation. I got them ready to ferment by replacing the beverage dip tube with a floating dip tube that has a filter at the end. I'm still checking out kegs as fermenters, but as soon as I give them enough of a trial period, I'll make a video on some things to look out for. Alright, time to transfer to my fermenters. Okay, so it was at this point that I realized something was wrong. It was totally clogged. It ended up being a piece of the rubber gasket from the valve that got stuck in there, and I'm glad it didn't make it into the final beer, but nonetheless, it was really frustrating. Auto siphon to the rescue. After struggling a little bit with the auto siphon, I eventually got the beer racked into both kegs, but I was way off on my volume. I was hoping for 4 gallons into each keg, but I got more like 3.5 gallons in one and 3 gallons in the other. Not only did I get less beer in each keg, but my starting gravity was way higher than expected. A 1057. I pitched a 1-liter starter of WLP001 Cali ale yeast into one, and 1 packet of Saftlager 3470 into the other, and then placed them in my chest freezer to ferment at 66 degrees Fahrenheit.
Not only did I not transfer as much into my fermenters as expected, but my gravity was way higher than it should have been. It's a 1057. It was supposed to be a 1048.
So that's gonna change the beer. That's gonna change the overall beer. I was expecting something around 5%, and I'm gonna get something a lot higher. And to be honest with you, that's not really what I was looking for. So that is a rookie mistake for sure. Change the recipe first. I'm not a number chasing guy, but I do build my recipes with a certain like end product in mind. And for this one, it's going to be different than what I expected because the alcohol percentage is going to be higher. That's really not what I was looking for. Now, does that mean it's going to be a bad beer? Not necessarily. It's just going to be different from what I was expecting. So there's only one way to find out how it's going to turn out, and that is to wait until it's finished and I get to taste it. So hopefully everything goes as planned, but like I said, there's only one way to find out if this beer is going to be any good, and that is to wait until it's done and taste it. I feel like a few things have went wrong so far, not only brew day, but now one of the kegs I was fermenting in, I had a spunding valve on it. I was going to do the lager yeast under pressure, and there was no pressure in there at all. There hadn't been any pressure. So I opened up the keg and it's fermenting. There was a leak in the lid. So I have sealed it up, but I am now not fermenting it under pressure. I've got 2 blow-off tubes going into 1 jar, and it is happily bubbling along. Take a listen. After letting both beers sit for about 2 weeks in primary fermentation at 66 degrees, they finally finished out with no further issues. If you see the chickens, they are out behind me as well too. Chickens. I probably overreacted a little bit. Starting out with less water, probably not as big of a deal as I made it out to be. I could have totally fixed it. All I had to do was sparge with that water, or I could have even topped up my fermenters. Not a big deal. I don't know if it was just because I was tired and I wasn't thinking straight. I have no idea. I don't know why I decided to just use 10 gallons and cut the water short that day. I don't know why I didn't decide to make up for it in the sparge or just top up my fermenters with that extra water. I have no idea why I did any of that. That's why I was calling it a rookie mistake. I just wasn't thinking. Anyway, it's done. It's behind me. The past is the past. Let's move on. I have less in this one because less is lager. So this is the lager yeast. This is the ale yeast. They look absolutely identical to me. So one of the things that I did that was different was I fermented them in the keg. That worked out good after I got that little leak solved. They're still in the fermenter. Because I have the floating dip tube in there, I kind of figured, you know what, I'm just gonna leave it in there. I'm thinking, because I ended up with only like 3 gallons in one and 2.5 gallons in the other, I'm thinking that they're gonna be gone before I get any off flavors from them sitting on the yeast. So I'm just keeping them in there. And besides, I don't have another keg to transfer them to because I only have 4 kegs, and the 2 that are in the fridge right now, they're nowhere close to being done. And I don't want to dump beer. So they're just going to sit on the yeast cake. Now, as far as how did they come out? So I've got less for lager. It smells a little lagerish to me. It's just got a little bit more yeast character maybe to it. Like that typical lager yeast character. I don't know if it's quite sulfur. The ale yeast smells cleaner than the lager yeast. I don't know if that's because I have less in the lager and more in the ale, but all right, I'm just gonna taste them. The WLP001, the Cali ale yeast, is like such a clean yeast for ale. Really good. I mean, it's really not a very hoppy pale ale. It does have a little bit more bite to it than I was hoping. I'm thinking that might be because it's a little bit higher gravity than I was hoping for as well too. That could be like a little alcohol. For being 2 different yeasts, they're remarkably similar. Now, either I'm just a really bad taster, or they're just kind of hard to pick apart. I'm not gonna lie to you, they're not my favorite pale ales. There's just something like a harshness to both of them. I don't know if it's because they ended up being a higher gravity than they were supposed to be, or it was the combination of hops. There's just a little bit of like a harsh, I don't even know how to explain it. They both have it though. I think I get it more pronounced in the lager than the ale. They're clean. They could use a little bit more hop
like maybe flavor. Maybe dry hopping it would have produced that. They're clean, they're drinkable, they're a little higher alcohol than I would have wanted. If I was gonna do this again, I would absolutely not use a lager yeast for this beer. It's okay. So I debated putting whether or not to put my recipe in here. I don't necessarily think it's the recipe's fault. I think it was user error in the part of the amount of water that I used that kind of is making it a little bit more alcohol-y than it was supposed to be. So I'm gonna post my recipe in the bottom. I'm gonna post my original recipe, the one that I didn't follow. So if you do decide to brew it, keep in mind that it's gonna be different than this, hopefully in a better way. The ale yeast is definitely not bad. This is definitely drinkable. I'm going to absolutely finish this one. We did have some family over the weekend for my son's birthday party, and I was serving them the ale yeast because I have more of that one, the ale yeast one, pale ale, and it was well received. They enjoyed it. I'll be honest with you, it's not my favorite. It is clean though. Yeah, the ale yeast is definitely, that's funny, I would think the lager yeast was going to be cleaner than the ale yeast, but the yeast character that this provided, I don't know if it's just because of the hops and the grains that I used, maybe there was too much alcohol in it, but I do not like the lager yeast in this one. No, it's just got a harshness. Maybe that's because it actually needs to lager. It's only been in the keg for maybe like conditioning, cold conditioning for maybe a week now. It's just got a little bit of harshness to it that I'm not enjoying as much in this one. I'll drink it, it'll pass. I do like that one better. I do like the ale better. If you're gonna do this one, I recommend using the ale yeast. It is definitely better in this beer. I would not use the lager yeast. I don't think I would ever use the lager yeast again. And next time, my next brew day, I am going much, much simpler. After everything that I dealt with on that brew day and having to split the batches and trying fermenting in kegs and all that, I'm going back to the basics and I'm brewing something simple, drinkable, keeping it clean, keeping it simple. Thanks for watching today. I'm gonna cheers with the ale because this one is definitely better. So cheers, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Now they're the same size. It's funny because the ale yeast almost smells cleaner than the lager yeast. The lager yeast. Oh, nice out.